Okay, that's an interesting start. Thank you very much, Lucy, for that introduction. I'm actually quite pleased to be, a psychologist in this kind of modern era. It seems to be like the one occupation that's kind of going to increase in demand, mental health and nurturing. I'm kind of toying around with the title of technotherapist. Something to think about in the future, for sure. But today I'll talk about a few trends, really. And I want to talk about how technology is increasing. I mean, there are a lot of technological trends. One that I'm really interested in is how technology is making our workforce more entrepreneurial. And this has a positive connotation, but I also think that, being entrepreneurial is a kind of double-edged sword, really. There are also some negatives to it. Let's start, I'll talk about a few trends, but let's start with a kind of quick question. Let's see the knowledge here in the audience. The first question, what do 70% of entrepreneurs have in common?
Ambition.
Very good. Ambition, but actually failure, okay? 70% of entrepreneurs actually fail. Most of them will work longer hours and earn less money than if they had been working for someone else. Now, okay, so what am I trying to say here? Basically, we're going a bit towards that direction. The relevance is that we're now working more hours. The working hour is 47 hours on average per week. We are expected to be online after work. I think it's about 70% of employers expect to be able to reach their employees after work. Most people, about half of the population, feel that they struggle with switching off their phones and switching off working life after work. Desktop lunching is reaching 80% levels. And we're not actually earning more for that as well. So actual wages have been stagnating even though productivity is on the increase. And obviously that's due to automation and the ability to be more efficient with machines. So this is kind of the negative way of it. One of the positive ways of, I guess, the way we are becoming more entrepreneurial, still a double-edged sword, is that the workplace is becoming more flexible, right? So workplace flexibility is everywhere, so now you can actually demand workplace flexibility. But also, most businesses actually offer flexibility. Most employees want flexibility. And in fact, most employers think that it's beneficial for competitiveness. Okay, so it's no longer about where you do things. It's about when you deliver. It's not about how you do things. It's about what you actually deliver. So it's an increasing in workplace flexibility. There is even the increase of kind of boomerang workers where you can leave the job and then you can come back a few years later. So it's workplace flexibility in terms of changing occupations, going back to the same occupation, changing companies, going back to the same company as well. There's also the gig economy, which is on a massive rise. So if you don't really want to be either employed or you can't exactly be an entrepreneur or you don't want to be, you can be somewhere in the middle where you're employed by a company but you're a freelancer at the same time. Okay, so this is increasing substantially. You have the best example being obviously Uber, but we have Deliveroo, we have a lot of other companies that are becoming massive now. Basically, it's the new thing, and you have very kind of simple things where you can get websites where you can get people to do pretty much anything. So Fiverr, you can get people to do anything starting from $5. Okay, so you can get them to do a website, design an app, write a PhD. It's funny, but actually I've noticed students increasingly using websites to do their projects, like undergraduate projects, their master's projects. So it is increasing. And the thing is, you can also utilize this economy quite well. So for instance, for students, they can be employed by organizations for work experience, and organizations can use, let's say, free labor or very cheap labor. Okay, so it's kind of working, it's working to optimize things. But it's not only with kind of mundane occupations or trivial occupations either. Okay, so this is happening in really highly regulated and highly consequential occupations as well. So with doctors and physicians, so Medicas, for instance, would be one kind of freelance work where you actually hire a doctor. So you kind of type like an Uber thing and they're at your door within 2 hours. Okay, so you can actually hire freelance doctors. Same thing with lawyers. You can hire lawyers if you have an issue. Freelance lawyer comes in and tries to solve the issue. So this kind of on-demand economy or gig economy, if you like, is really on the increase. You can see the investment in it has increased dramatically over the last few years. McKinsey estimates that by 2025, 500 million workers will have used one of these platforms, adding to 2.7 trillion in GDP. So again, Upwork, freelancer, there are quite a number of these that are offering these jobs, and it is actually increasing. And the reason to why this economy is increasing, and it has a real impact on the way we do work, but one of the reasons to why it is increasing is that technology is there. The main kind of technological platform that is allowing this type of work to increase is obviously the rating economy, right? So today we're rating everything. We're rating products, we're rating restaurants, we are rating hotels, but we are also rating people, okay? So it's an eBay society where people are rated by the quality of the transactions that you have made with them. And Amazon, eBay, there are plenty of others that are doing this. Again, the reason it works is that, initially, it was kind of, you would only do transactions with trivial things that weren't, that didn't have too much risk. But now it's like if someone has like 50,000 transactions and 99% satisfaction rate, you don't really have to look at their CV, right? So you can be pretty confident that they won't screw you. So ratings are happening everywhere. LinkedIn has ratings. This is my ratings. I don't like the LinkedIn ratings because people just rate you just to get rated back. If you scratch my back, I scratch yours type thing, right? So I know I've done qualitative research, for instance, but it's not really something that I would be kind of endorsed for. You get rated by subordinates. So Glassdoor would have, it's kind of like a new performance appraisal thing, but you're rated by, hundreds of people. This is Rate My Professor. So in the US, this is the taxonomy of students, what they find important in terms of their professor. So overall quality, helpfulness, clarity, easiness, and hotness is what they're. I think we are all really looking with the business psychology community is really looking forward to this coming to the UK. You can be rated by customers, so consumers. Okay. I'm not sure I should call Tinder customers, but you can be kind of, you understand what I'm saying. So consumers, Uber, you rate the driver rates you. Tinder, you get rated. You're increasingly rated on the accuracy of the rating as well. So you can rate whether the picture of the person that you are on a date with was accurate on Tinder, for instance, or other platforms. In California, you can actually sit on a date with someone in a cafe, have some goggles on, and get the ratings about that person while you're talking to them. I think it's optimizing. I think it's still optimizing. It's a very complex world. It's simplifying the world in my view. You can also rate. Increasingly the ratings are made more qualified, are made more reliable by rating the ratings. So now you can rate the people that are rating. So you say, okay, this person is actually is very accurate in what they're saying. That person's rating isn't that good. So you can kind of see who is the top rater as well. And this is obviously used in performance management apps as well, which is quite useful at the end of the day. And no wonder then that you can now actually use these ratings. And Healthgrade in the US is the main platform that people go to when they're choosing a doctor. So they would actually choose doctors based on online ratings rather than kind of get recommendations from the hospital. So this is increasing dramatically. It's also making, the gig economy possible, and it's making the gig economy very desirable. Okay, so it is no wonder that you have now companies emerging that are doing online reputation or dealing with your online reputation and marketing. Now, this, again, it makes a lot of people in the workforce, it enables them to actually get into the workforce to optimize their skills, but it also makes the corporates think about the economy and therefore in need of actually accommodating that economy. So you need to kind of accommodate the outsourcing model because not only because it's a competition, but also because it makes sense, right? So companies grew really historically because the transaction cost of hiring people from the outside was bigger than having people in the same within the same company. But that's kind of reversing now because it's becoming actually cheaper to outsource things, and actually when you do outsource, these workers are usually hyper specialized on a particular task or a particular job that you want done. So the trend is reversing. You can actually incorporate an outsourcing model that's probably more cost effective and more efficient than a regular kind of traditional model of growing an organization. So one reason to why corporates are becoming flatter and are trying to incorporate innovation and different kind of cultures and structures is because of this. Another reason is, of course, the competition that they're getting. So a lot of these companies, competition from below, so from startups that can innovate and grow just within a few years. This is a very good example of companies who weren't there just a few years ago and now are market leaders. So this is happening from below. Of course, it's happening from above as well. So now we have the top 10% of companies, I think, accounting for 65% of the global GDP. So we have now the big guys actually being extremely influential, but also they are the ones that are they're slightly different. They're a slightly different animal because they're also very innovative at the same time. So it's no wonder that it's becoming increasingly difficult to have a monopoly and to kind of maintain a monopoly within the say 4 to 500 or whatever it is. So the period in which you can remain kind of at the top is shrinking more and more, which is why innovation within companies is also becoming increasingly important. Now, what is the implication for the workforce? What do these changes really imply for the workforce? I think technology, is making the workforce more entrepreneurial, forcing both individuals and companies to become more entrepreneurial. And I think that is a double-edged sword, really. I think there are some positives with that and some negatives with that. I think technological effects, positives, it allows a lot of flexibility for the workforce. People want to be flexible, allows autonomy. People want autonomy. It allows efficiency and productivity to increase without any extra labor, let's say. It is allowing a maximization of resources. So if you don't have a job, you can go and freelance and get together with other people and create a company. But you can also utilize your skills much more efficiently because there is a platform to do it with. And finally, you can innovate more efficiently as well. The amount of information that is out there that is available to anyone means that people can innovate better. Again, you can do it either within or within the kind of gig economy or within the companies as well. There are some negatives, I think, with the kind of the other side of the coin of being entrepreneurial. I think, or the technological side effects really, is that people really need to become very efficient at upskilling, at being their own brand, at innovating, at seeing opportunities and exploiting opportunities. And there are several reasons for that. So we already know the data, right? So it's about 60% of jobs can have about 30% of their activities automated. So we're kind of saying that a lot of activities at work can be automated, which means that wages could be pushed down, which means that you kind of need to upskill in order to, keep your wages high, do work that cannot be automated or outsourced to the gig economy. Another thing that you need to do is, obviously, competition is increasing. So, the other reason, I'm trying to figure out the points in my head. So the other reason is that what flexibility does is that, again, you need to be able to brand yourself quite well. So the average work tenure today is about 4.7 years in our organization, okay? So imagine that that's gonna even decrease in the future. So if you start at 20 or 22 and you finish at 67, you can imagine that you will have a lot of jobs, right? So, and they say, my dad used to have a job, I had 6, and my kids will have 6 at the same time. So the increase in the number of jobs that you will be changing throughout your career means that you will need to upskill in terms of, upskill, but also be able to brand yourself, know where you go, know what skills you have that you can offer that is more competitive than others, adapt to different environments, adaptation will be critical. So these are the things that you need to do. Third, the competition is increasing. If we have an increase in the gig economy, and I don't mean just from automation and robots, if we have a gig economy, obviously competition will increase. I mean, competition will increase by sort of freelancers will obviously compete with each other. The more freelancers you have, the more competition there will be. So if you are a freelancer, you compete with other freelancers. If you are an employee, you compete with other employees and freelancers. So competition increases, and again, this means that you need to, there is a kind of saying that actually what the gig economy might be is just another version of the assembly line, where the competition becomes so high that people have to become even more specialized in something so hyper specialized that in the end it looks like the assembly line, okay, and people are kind of just disengaged. And that's also leading, when you specialize too much, you can also automate those particular things. So that's another risk as well. And the issue with all of this stuff, which means that you need to upskill, you need to be opportunistic, you need to market yourself, you need to treat yourself as a brand, as an entrepreneur, is that a lot of this stuff is normally distributed, right? So this annoying normal distribution will still be there. So people will still differ in their tendency to upskill, to seek new knowledge, to brand themselves, to be online active, to manage their online reputation, to seek new opportunities, to try to adapt to new environments. There will be normal distribution in these things. So even if we assume, you can imagine that people who are more tech savvy, millennials, will already be a bit higher in the distribution. So everyone probably will be a bit higher in that distribution because you will have to, but millennials will have an advantage. But even within the millennials, there'll still be a normal distribution. So some millennials will be much more entrepreneurial than others, let's say. Okay, so that normal distribution will not go away, which means, again, there will be quite a lot of competition in terms of jobs that cannot be, so really the competitive advantage comes from not, being able to do things that cannot be automated or cannot be imitated, right? So we have, machines that, potentially this is the one thing they still cannot do. I think in the near future they will be able to do it, to innovate, but still we need people to innovate, to connect the dots. So companies are increasingly pressured to either acquire innovation or to actually acquire people who can innovate. And again, the massive tech companies do both. In fact, acquisitions have increased like threefold in the last 20 years or so. But again, a lot of the acquisition failure rate is quite big. And unless you have like billions to spend on it, a lot has to probably happen within for most organizations. If you think about it, what is innovation? How, what do we mean by innovation? That is really two things. It's about knowledge or information, and it's about creativity or connecting the dots, right? So the more knowledge you have, and the more you connect the dots, the more innovative you will be. And I don't mean like information in terms of just, information is online. It has to really be within someone for them to be able to connect the dots. But it also needs to be a tendency to want to connect those dots and an ability to exploit it. So, and there are clear kind of evidence from our research, from other research, that employees who are entrepreneurial tend to produce higher innovation output. So, that's really where the competitive advantage will come. It's not like you can just start hiring lots of entrepreneurial people. A lot of organizations probably will know that if you don't have the right culture, if you're not ready for innovation, it's not going to happen, right? So, and this is, in fact, we find evidence for that quite neatly, that entrepreneurial employees in, let's say, not ready cultures or bureaucratic cultures won't actually perform any better than other employees. It's a double jeopardy, because actually bureaucratic cultures, they will be more disengaged in them, and if they get disengaged, they're more likely to quit. So it's not like you can go and try to steal Google's employees or Netflix or Facebook or whatever, because they will leave or go and start their own. Okay, so again, even though we are aware of this task, it seems like there's quite a lot to do still. Okay, so when we look at the figures, we see that a small percentage are doing it well, a large percentage aren't doing it well still. So, and I think this will be a big task for HR in particular. And the task obviously gets bigger when you think you need to incorporate automation, you need to incorporate the outsourcing economy, etc. The task is quite big. But I think we have even a bigger task as experts, as policymakers, as leaders, to actually optimize innovation and potentially moderate innovation. Okay, so I think we haven't really done a great job of thinking about this. When we think about it, most employees are actually disengaged already, and now we're telling them that they will have to interact with robots, and some of their jobs might be taken, their wages might become lower. Surely that's not what innovation is about, right? Innovation should surely be improving things rather than degrade them. I think that's what innovation is really about. And human creativity, developed as a survival mechanism. It was beneficial. It was adaptive. It was beneficial for survival. So it developed. But surely, if it's no longer adaptive or beneficial for people, clearly we need to think about moderating it. I don't think it's taboo to say that. We have developed to like sugar and fat because it was adaptive for survival for our ancestors. But today we are regulating that because it has a burden on the economy. It's the biggest issue that the NHS is facing. And these things, these evolutionary things, they've developed over 2 million years. We can't really expect people to be responsible about them. We can't expect people to unlearn to like sugar. They can adapt to kind of diet or whatever, but they can't unlearn it. That takes thousands of years. Okay, so we really need to think about, how can we be responsible about putting innovation out there? We can't just think, people should switch off their phones after work. It just doesn't work like that. We're regulating a lot of other things. I think we should think about innovation in that way as well, because really we can't expect people to do the right thing with the wrong technology, is the main point. And I think we can also optimize innovation much better. We have the technology to do workforce optimization much better, in my view. And so why aren't we thinking about it? Now we have, in terms of like matching people's talents to environments and thinking about people's mental health, there's been so much innovation in the consumer products, but so little innovation, relatively little innovation in workforce optimization. We have now the technology to pretty much assess someone or get someone's psychological profile fairly accurately. If you think about it, like the online footprint, like whether it's search, whether it's social media activity, whether it's emailing, text, whatever it may be. Combine that with psychometrics, biometrics, genetic data, gaming, and the list goes on. We can pretty much profile people quite well now. We can, know what they're feeling, what they're doing, what they're thinking about most of the time, and in what environments they are doing that. I think what the missing link is that we're not really profiling the environment. We haven't really done that. So if we just need to profile the environment, I don't think it's that difficult to do. So spatial, physical, social dimensions of the environment. And then just build algorithms to say, okay, these are the environments that this particular individual works best in, or this particular group works best in. And then, then we can, based on that algorithm, optimize where people should be, where they feel best, and where they perform best. I think that sounds like logical to me. And I do think we have the technology to do it. You can talk about data privacy. We can discuss that, but I don't think anyone is against the idea of like optimizing the workforce in terms of like placing people where they will feel the best and where they will perform best. And I'm not talking about kind of the ideal job for everyone, but at least optimizing people's talents and well-being. Okay. So optimizing and responsibility, I think, are the two things. So if something doesn't work, moderate it. If something works, just make sure that it's out there. And this goes for things like talent as well, right? So if we're talking about talent management, surely we can think about these things as well. So it's not just about, okay, so what is, how do talent, or what are the traits that will be beneficial and who will thrive in this new environment? I mean, we can ask that question. So for instance, technology has a lot of benefits, but it also can produce uncertainty and sometimes gaps in regulation. Now, entrepreneurial people will be maybe thriving in this environment, but so might psychopaths. Okay, so we can't just say who thrives in this environment. We need to think about what is the environment that we create, right? So what is the innovation that we put out there so that people thrive in that environment? We don't want an environment where only psychopaths thrive in the end. So I think we need to think about, as experts, as policymakers, as leaders, about workforce optimization, moderation, and even regulation, I would say. I don't want to be preaching too much, but that's about what I have to say anyway. Thank you.
Have we got a microphone at all for any questions? Thanks. So loads. I've got loads of questions. Has anyone got one that they would like to ask? We've got a microphone coming around. We'll come to you next, Michael.
Hello. I'm interested in the political dynamics of what you're saying. I can see that the biggest challenge we face, I think, in our social and economic environment now is the loss of mass employment. And you're describing a world in which we have increased fragmentation, which I entirely see the force of and see happening around me. In fact, I do it myself. I am gifted with the resources to be able to survive in this world, and so will my children be. But we've just seen the impact of vast swathes of this country feeling disenfranchised from the world of the kind that you're describing. And you talk about responsibility, regulation, moderating this work. How do we take people with us so that we have an inclusive society, an inclusive working world, rather than a one that's differentiated by those who feel marginalised and those who succeed?
It's not a small question. But I think the main thing I would say, I want to just give a quick answer, is to kind of think about, as experts, what are the technologies, what is the impact of certain technologies on the workforce, and if we see a negative impact, we should definitely do something about it. And I'm sure as experts and leaders we can get together and figure it out. And again, if we see that technology enables certain things like inclusiveness, potentially the gig economy could be one way of doing that. Again, if it's moderated in the right way, then we should use that technology to increase these things. I think it's very difficult to reverse innovation. Although it seems like a lot of kind of apps and these kind of some smaller innovation is about kind of reversing what we've done. So it's like, let's make people more sociable because we used to be like that, and now globalization makes. So it's like we're trying to reverse it. I think it's going to be quite difficult. So I think what we should do is try to moderate where we see clear negative impacts. Like obesity is a very clear one. Smoking or drug use or whatever. All these things are regulated, right? So we should do the same with innovation where we see negative impact. And I don't want to be too open about these things like mobile phones and all of that. And then kind of use the innovation that is going to increase inclusiveness and potentially benefit the workforce. I think it's too long of an answer to actually give you more detail.
Sorry, question over here. But Michael, the microphone. Put your hand up, Michael. There you go.
Hi, thank you very much for a very stimulating presentation about entrepreneurship and the way technology impacts it. What I'm curious about is, particularly the previous comment about what's going on in British society, is the time when UK society was more innovative than any other worldwide was in the Victorian times, when Britain was renowned for its entrepreneurship. I'm just wondering, do you have any perspective on what happened in entrepreneurship in Victorian times that perhaps we've lost?
I don't know. I actually don't know.
Not a historian. That's okay. That's okay. Any more?
That's the first time I answer a question like that. I should probably
I'm here for
know.
Alan.
Thank you. And my question kind of leads on a bit from the last one, but it's a bit easier. It's a bit easier, but it's about the economics of making what you're describing happen. Because I think that if you look at a lot of the innovations we've seen, the economics of them have been driven by capital and making money out of doing them. In doing it responsibly, does it make money, and how can people figure out how to get that to make money? So that the capital behind it makes basically.
So my view is that we can't eliminate people from the market, right? So or from the workforce. So we need to. I mean, machines won't spend. So we still need people to spend money, which is why we need to give them wages. So we need to incorporate them, which is why in the long term it makes even economic sense not to automate everything, not to kind of get rid of people from. So even in an economic sense, I would definitely do the same thing. Moderate certain innovations and try to explore options which kind of increases inclusion of people in the workforce, but also optimizes everyone's talents and well-being. I think we can do that. It feels like it's taboo talking about moderating innovation. But if we think about it like other things, like moderating drug use or any other thing, I know it feels difficult to kind of connect those two, but I do think it's the same thing because it will have a negative impact on the workforce if not, right? So we should think about that.
Okay, one more last one.
When you were talking about sort of entrepreneurs who are within big organisations, what are the conditions that you found need to be present in order for them to thrive and not land up leaving?
Yeah, so biggest one, as you would expect, management. So managers not actually promoting or not allowing people to actually be entrepreneurial. So I think that's potentially even more important than the wider culture. But it's basic things like allowing people to make quicker decisions, giving these people enough resources to be able to exploit ideas that they have. But again, the statistics is something like 90% of managers or employees feel that managers don't support the ideas that they have. And 80% of ideas, or 80% of managers will not tolerate failure. So if you try an idea and you fail, you're not rewarded, you're punished, basically. And 50% of employees will actually leave because they cannot express their ideas. So a lot is down to management.
So is it almost kind of embedding failure in the culture, that it's okay to fail and to try?
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely one of the aspects. Yeah.
Right, guys, sadly, we have to call it a day there. However, Gorkan is going to be here again tomorrow afternoon as one of our panel speakers as well. So he'll be back. If you've got more questions, by all means, you can pin him down again tomorrow. I think just thinking about some of the things that he's been speaking about, the implications of the gig economy, the impact that that's going to have on things like the need for us to be able to brand ourselves in a world of increasing competition, to think about the reality of having to retrain several times and doing different careers over the course of a lifetime. All things that are completely and directly relevant to us as business psychologists. So, Gorkan, thank you very much for your research and for sharing.